and welcome back to the Pregnancy and Postnatal Entrepreneurs Collective podcast. I'm your host, Niamh Cassidy, and today I am joined by Tayba, and she runs her own private practice in counselling and psychotherapy, organises and facilitates psycho-spiritual and educational retreats, as well as providing Mizan therapy using traditional healing techniques to address conditions involving the reproductive organs, the digestive system and emotional health. She empowers women to work with their menstrual cycle. And today we're going to talk about how understanding your menstrual cycle helps, supports you as a woman in business. So Tayba, can you tell us a bit about what Mizan therapy is and how you ended up doing this type of work?
Thank you, Niamh. Thank you for that introduction. So in terms of coming into this work and what it is, I think I'll just sort of go with the backstory before coming into what it was.
Yeah, brilliant.
I've never had an issue with periods. My menstrual cycle has been brilliant. I've also taken lots of care of myself, thanks to my father, who was always telling me about certain herbs and things, that I need to take. But also he was very much of the attitude of rest, you look pale, you need to take care of yourself. That was my sort of upbringing. And so I never experienced painful periods. Come my daughter, and it used to debilitate her to the point where she would keel over, she would feel nauseous. It was just horrible seeing her in this state. We would have an appointment with the GPs, and literally she was told, here, take a pill, and that's it, this is normal. Everybody experiences something like this. And she was like, but that can't be normal. And I don't want to take the pill because I've seen the effect it's had on my friends. So I started looking into, and doing what I can with her, what I was used to. The warm milk with acerio seeds, for example, the warm sort of broths, etc. Still not helping her, so to speak. I, in my mind, thought, I wonder if she's got PCOS or endometriosis. But I won't know because we're not being, sent for any kind of scans or anything. And then I came across Mizan therapy, and I'd come across it around 2016, but I'd parked it away. I thought, oh, this is really good. This is interesting. Maybe one day I'll pursue it. I can't just yet. Didn't think anything of it. A friend of mine, she, again, was going through some difficulties. She sought out Mizan therapy. I'm like, hang on, this is what I parked. And I was training as a psychotherapist at this point as well. But I would do anything to help and support my daughter. So I looked at the training, thought, this seems like the appropriate kind of modality, and will probably be really useful for my daughter. And especially when I heard positive things from my friend. Signed up for the training, and I didn't look back since. So my daughter was told that she probably, won't be able to conceive, and this is how life will be for her. I can gladly say I'm a grandma of two now. So that's thanks to Mizan therapy and her putting in place the things she needed to according to Mizan therapy. So Mizan therapy was founded by Bushra Finch. She had trained as a midwife, a doula. Then she went to different parts of the world and saw that there's some traditional healing practices that are very similar in some of the Eastern African countries. Nothing like that, or nothing similar to that here in the West. So I think she trained in Avigo, I think it was the Avigo massage. And then she brought all of those practices to England, to the UK, and developed Mizan therapy. Mizan itself means balance. And the belief is that if one aspect of you is out of balance, or one organ is out of balance, it imbalances everything else. So hence she termed it or coined it Mizan therapy. And Mizan therapy has two particular parts to it. One is a hands-on massage. So it's traditional healing sort of massages that she's brought together of the upper and lower abdomen and your back as well. And also certain sort of stretches and techniques to align the uterus. So there's that element, the very kind of practical and physical element of it. The other side to that is within the consultation, it's around self-care practices such as castrol packs, vaginal or yoni steaming, or womb steaming, so to speak. Diet in terms of, the foods that we eat according, and I'll come into this, according to our inner season and inner cycle as well, and belly binding or fache wrapping as well, so to keep the uterus aligned. Because if the uterus is misaligned or has moved out of place, if you haven't been born with the uterus being retroverted or a certain way or shape or form, then throughout life, the uterus, the womb, can become misaligned to the right, to the left, tilted somewhat, and so it needs support. So through wear and tear and how we might carry our bags, high heels, the lot basically. So it's informing and guiding clients on how to best look after their womb space and nourish themselves in that way, and especially through, I think, cycle charting and knowing our own inner seasons is really, really crucial to that kind of healing.
In some ways, I'm kind of like embarrassed nearly about how little I know about this type of thing, like doing the work that I do in working with pregnant people and in working with people in the postnatal space. For me personally, I suppose I've never really had a huge amount of challenges around my cycle or anything like that. So maybe it hasn't been something that has come up for me like it hadn't for you until you were presented with it for your daughter. And there will be other listeners who will have a much better understanding of the concepts that you're talking about and who will have done some of this work and will have an interest, a deeper knowledge and interest as well. But for those of us who this is very new kind of concept, you mentioned those inner seasons. So what are those inner seasons of the menstrual cycle, and how can us understanding them help us?
So the inner seasons are pretty much similar to, or are similar to, the external seasons that we experience. Although I know the British weather has got a bad name for itself, but generally speaking, we do go through spring, summer, autumn, and winter, and there's a similar cycle that happens internally as well. So you've got your menstrual phase or moon time, which is the winter season. You then have your follicular. So from winter we come in through to spring, and then we go into the ovulatory season, the summer season, and then we're coming into the luteal phase, the autumn season, back into winter. So we have everybody's season, so to speak, will differ. As a general rule, generically, if I'm teaching and not speaking to a client, one-to-one, generally we kind of say it's, 1 to 7 days of your winter, 7 to 14 is your spring. However, through cycle charting, what the individuals get to understand is exactly when that winter season ends, when they're coming into spring, and then for women who are perhaps trying to conceive, when is the ovulatory window, which is crucial. So once you know, what your cycle looks like, and I often encourage women to cycle chart for 3 months at the bare minimum, because that's where you can get all this amazing data from. Not only with regards to the seasons themselves, but also in terms of, what are your energy levels like? What's your mood like? What is it that you wish for something to come to an end to? What is it that you want to start? So once you know and have this vital information, women can work more productively, especially when self-employed as well. For example, for myself, I know that my most difficult days, where I'm really lethargic, where I want to be more sort of insular and, hibernate, is my last day of autumn, the luteal phase, and the first day of my bleed during that winter. So those 2 days, I won't book anybody in for a Mizan session, especially when it's quite physically demanding. If I'm massaging, I may opt to have a shorter session. So if I have got a Mizan client, I may choose to do the consultation bit online and then put them in for the massage for a later date. So I work with my cycle in that sense. In the peak of it, when I'm in my ovulatory phase, I have learned to also still say no in my ovulatory phase. What happens during that season, the summer season? You're at your peak, you're confident, you've got a lot of energy, and so it's yes, can you come for a coffee? Yes. Shall we do this? Yes. So you kind of constantly saying yes, and then you forget that, hang on a minute, I've got this cycle that I need to work with. So I take a look at what's my sort of cycle looking like, and how much time and energy can I afford to kind of use, because I still also need to contain some of that for my luteal phase, for my winter phase. If I want to say yes to something, I'll kind of say, well, maybe not this week, but can we schedule it in for 3 weeks time? Or if it's something that if I'm gonna meet friends at home, for example, I think, okay, actually, that might not be so bad during my winter season, but I won't do it on the first day of my bleed, maybe into the second or third day of my bleed. So I really work with my cycle in that sense, and I really encourage women to start charting your cycle. The apps are really useful, but if you can cycle chart physically, and there are some performers online, but I can also send something to yourself for any viewers who would be interested in that. If they use that, and start from the day that they bleed, they will collect so much vital, rich data for themselves. And
it's so really interesting to think, in some way it's so mind-blowing that this isn't so obvious. Do you know what I mean? That this isn't just something that we would naturally have evolved to do. So what's coming up in my head is that we probably used to do it, and we've been taught not to do it nearly by society, and that it's been trained out of us by industrialization or something along those lines. Yeah, by living in a patriarchy, let's just say it out loud. That the ability and the agency to follow those cycles has nearly been taken away by the modern world. So you're right, we're lucky when we're self-employed that if we want to do this, we will have a little bit more agency in being able to do that because we can manage our own schedules, I suppose, for the most part. So if someone's interested in trying this out, what are the benefits? How is it going to help with both the productivity side and with, our overall well-being, or balance, I think was the word that you were using earlier.
So if you're optimizing work and rest, you've got more energy for other things. And there's something about being a little bit more, perhaps, I want to say emotionally regulated as well, but also being aware that, the hormonal changes will heighten perhaps certain sort of feelings and emotions. And therefore, for example, if you're solely the person who tends to cook, let's say, and feeding the family, knowing your cycle means that if you discover that there's a certain amount of days that, you're really drained, but you still have to carry on with making food and feeding the family, then perhaps there's something about batch cooking when you're in your summer phase. So that in and of itself will enhance productivity as well. So you've got chance to, if you don't want to do something physically demanding, you've done some batch cooking, or you may order a takeaway. For that particular, some people order a takeaway every Friday or once a month. Maybe changing that to when it suits you in your cycle would be helpful. It allows room and space for that little bit of, if you've got some kind of deadline approaching, for example, you're taking a step back, you're not doing the physically demanding stuff, but perhaps you've got some reading and research to do. So you're relaxing. And again, that's enhancing that sort of productivity. And you're doing something practical, but not necessarily so taxing in that sense as well. It allows for you to balance your, the mental and emotional health as well. So you're not sort of so physically drained from the day-to-day daily activities as well. And perhaps it's also a time for, if you're in a position to seek out support and help, maybe those are the times that you can seek it out further as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is just such an interesting concept, as I said, to think about. And yeah, so obvious in so many ways, but not something that is talked about really out loud that much. So you mentioned kind of tracking your cycle and getting an idea of how that works, and then having an idea of kind of when you're feeling more energetic or less energetic or different kind of moods. But what is there anything else, when people have done that, what else can they do? What practical tips or tools can they use to sync to use, work with your menstrual cycle, I suppose?
So I'll what I will do is I'll talk about each phase and what perhaps can be done
Brilliant.
through each phase. In terms of the practical tips for syncing self-care with the phase of the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So during the winter phase, it's a time for prioritizing some of that rest and some introspection as well. And perhaps it's a time to reflect on the goals and journaling thoughts as well. So you kind of, that there's something expressive being done. And, you know, some focus on gentle movement as well, gentle sort of exercise, some yoga, some stretching perhaps to support the body, and then also incorporating more sort of warmer foods such as soups and stews as well, as they provide that sort of energy. Again, maybe I won't go too deep into this, but what we have found is that because of the country we are living in and what we are surrounded by, we're an island with lots of water. The country itself England itself is cold and damp in a sense. And so when we're walking barefoot in and around the house, perhaps, even if it is spring, there's a cold draft coming through often enough, and that cold draft will hit your feet and the cold will rise up to your womb space, making that cold. And therefore, sometimes when women are struggling with their period, it's because the womb space is cold. And so, therefore, in terms of us sort of instructing, having warming foods helps with any kind of stagnation that's going on in the body as well. So in terms of, as you come through the winter phase, you're coming into the follicular spring phase. And this, again, a time for perhaps goal setting and learning new skills and trying sort of fresh activities as your energies levels are rising. So at this point, women may want to kind of choose cardio or strength-based sort of exercises as well. As we know, exercise is linked to mental health, and therefore, me suggesting some of these sort of more physical activities to do as well. And at this point, you might want to eat more sort of light and fresh sort of meals, rich in fruits and vegetables, to support that sort of feeling of renewal as well. Just what spring brings as a season, and it's similar in terms of what's going on internally. And then as you can come into the ovulatory phase, the summer phase, and where, we're full of sort of confidence and feeling a bit more vibrant, a bit more kind of social in that sense, feeling like social butterflies. Perhaps it's about leveraging the peak, that peak energy as well. And the confidence for networking, for social events and collaborations. What's interesting is just as just as a personal example, I'd booked this with yourself as I'm in my summer phase. So this is me sort of cycle syncing, and I know that, this will be more beneficial to me, and I'll be able to give more in that sense. And then here, women may prefer to do some sort of high intensity exercising. And in terms of foods that they may choose to eat, it would be perhaps the sort of leafy greens and lean proteins now as well, just to fuel and enhance that productivity. We then start kind of like our energy levels begin to dip, coming into the luteal autumn phase. So here you might want to start think about focusing on completing tasks, maybe tying up loose ends a little bit as well. So you're kind of preparing for that restful period in a sense. So as energy is slowing down, you want to slow down a little bit as well. And then again, the kind of physical activities women might be encouraged to do is Pilates and walking, or even meditation to ease any kind of like PMS sort of symptoms. It's really about sort of then grounding yourself in the luteal phase. And in terms of foods, you want things that are rich in magnesium. Again, I don't know, I wonder if this resonates with most or some women, but during the luteal phase, it can be difficult to kind of like sleep, and the achiness in the body and the bones, especially like the legs. Magnesium, would help with that, or magnesium-rich foods such as nuts, seeds, dark chocolate as well. And that kind of supports relaxation and can help to combat any kind of irritability. So yeah, this is what I would kind of like suggest in terms of optimizing productivity, working with the cycle as well, and maybe creating like a restful environment, creating rituals, so to speak. Things like that would be really, really useful for women.
I think that's really helpful to take it through in the seasons and the correlation of things that we understand already, around winter, spring, and summer. I'm thinking about how some people, due to certain types of birth control that they might take, may not be having a full cycle and may not be having a bleed. Is there any benefits to these practices for those people, or how would they kind of monitor it, I suppose?
No, absolutely. A brilliant question there. So often enough for clients who perhaps, aren't having a regular cycle due to birth control, or what we say is even if you are cycle charting, what you would do, so even the menopausal woman, menopausal woman, is to cycle chart from the new moon and the full moon. So that gives you an idea of, where you're at and how you're feeling and what's coming up for you. So again, that, for 3 months worth will be lots of rich data in that. So even if you're not bleeding, with birth control, for example, your organ is still working,
Yeah.
but it's that perhaps that device, that the medication that's kind of like halting a bleed to occur. So knowing that do have some kind of cycle, and for women who have gone through hysterectomies as well, certainly again they can cycle chart according to the lunar cycle, basically.
That's a really at least it gives you a start and an end point to be tracking different things. And I think some people with coils, say for example, might still experience symptoms of ovulation, so they might know when that's happening, so they could chart it against that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And our body, the thing is, you spoke earlier, and I've been trying to refrain from going so much into patriarchy, colonialism, and capitalism. But, we're kind of, one, we're shamed for feeling the way we do. Is it that time of month? You're a bit more, a bit emotional, aren't you? A bit oversensitive. Well, yeah, if you understood the hormones, this is normal. But also, we're kind of disconnected from our bodies. We're supposed to be really kind of like, work like machinery, 9 to 5 or whatever that is. And period pain. I say this loud and clear. Period pain is common, but it's not normal. So anybody's telling you period pain is normal, it's not normal. You might have some discomfort, and your body's telling you something, but you should not be in so much pain. Your body is telling you something. But throughout, maybe say since sort of the world wars that occurred, and then women going into the working environment, things have shifted, and so much so. But we are biologically different with our hormones to men. So we need to kind of like, find that balance and, um, empower ourselves in resting, perhaps in doing certain things and knowing about our anatomy, so to speak.
When you're talking about those, you know, the societal stigmas and things, I'm thinking back to me as a teenager in the 90s and the ads of the women in the white pants having a wonderful period and being able to, because they had a pad or something. And like these were the only conversations that were had in public about periods. It was how to hide them or mask them, so here's the pain relief, or here's the thing that's going to stop you from bleeding everywhere. And that's literally all the information we had.
And that's it. And look at where we are with, women are suffering so much with endometriosis. It takes 7 years to diagnose them. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think recently they've created a pill of some kind, maybe. I need to research that a little bit more. But I think I did come across something like that. But it's taken so many years. Women existed for centuries,
Yeah.
eons ago. And how is it that, we haven't? I mean, there is an answer, there is a straightforward answer, but how is it that we missed, a whole kind of, species of people in terms of when it came to research, in terms of when it came to, medicine. And, again, if we go back, it was, men in white coats that, did whatever research, but didn't do enough on, on women. And if they did do anything, again, it was, we were kind of, what's the word I'm looking for?
The deviant.
Deviant and very kind of, absolutely.
Other, these are the
Yeah,
things.
and
Yeah.
not important enough. But also, just off the back of that, I'm just thinking, like, um, historically, there were red tents. We did have red tents. What are deemed now, women who are perhaps spiritual, or they call themselves perhaps witches, or but back in history, anything that they were doing within herbalism or within that sort of empowering themselves or other women with their own bodies were burnt at the stake.
I know. And I think, the feels to me like there's a revolution coming, you know what I mean? That there is this evolvement of women speaking more about these topics, perimenopause in particular, and the work that you're doing around teaching people how to work along with their cycles. So, for the people who are feeling a little bit kind of riled up about this, what can we do to kind of further this work, to challenge the stigmas and the myths that are out there?
I think, what first and foremost, just like with what yourself doing, Niamh, or what I'm doing, if we're doing the work that we do and we've got some knowledge around it, is to raise that awareness. Secondly, is circles. Women will get a lot of information from that. Join these women's circles. There's a lot of them out there, and we've got the World Wide Web at our fingertips. Also, look for practitioners as well. Educate yourselves. I think do a lot of reading where you can. I would even say go back to basics. Look at your anatomy, research your anatomy, educate yourself on it. Because, I mean, obviously, I'm doing this work, but if I wasn't doing this work, I probably wouldn't really pay heed to
Yeah.
the organs in my body. So I'd say go back to basics, as if you're back in primary school or secondary school, the biology, learn about yourself, learn about the anatomy, in terms of, the hormones, etc. And ask questions, pose those questions. No question is silly. No question is, no question is too much. No question is too little. I think asking questions and surrounding yourself with, other women, people who do this work will be useful. I think there's the Red School. They have lots of information.
Okay.
Dr. Nigar Arif talks a lot about, women and women's cycles. So, they would be certainly two people that I would kind of like, organizations that I would recommend that sense. So yeah, I think, just going back to basics, educating yourself, and with people like yourselves who are in this profession, being out there that little bit more and showing up in these spaces also helps.
Absolutely. In relation, bringing it back to the group, to kind of the self-employed woman, is there any other final tips or information that you'd like to pass on?
So I would first and foremost, I'd say if you don't already track your cycle through an app or physically, I would highly recommend using the app, but also a physical kind of copy, because it's something quite cathartic and also helpful in when you're writing things down, and it gives you that space to just have a moment at least, and to kind of like ground yourself, and let your cycle work for you. And as I said, I think I mentioned earlier, so if it means batch cooking for when you're in your winter season, do a bit of batch cooking. If you have help and support, and perhaps you want something fresh on the day, is there somebody you can lean in on and say, well, actually, do you mind sending me a portion of that? Will you make extra? If somebody's with their partner, I would also highly encourage anybody who's living with a partner, they should know, about your cycle. So I think your partner, or even if you've got children who are old enough, in a sense, to know, to know and understand your cycle. I think those are things that will be really helpful. So when you've got that support around you, then you can further delve into optimizing sort of productivity and self-care.
That's brilliant. And I think, there's just so many implementable tips in that people can really take away and actually work with. So thank you very much for your time. If people want to find out more about the work that you do, where is the best place for them to go?
So our website, so it's nurturingheartandwomb.com, and Instagram, which is at nurturingheartandwomb as well. So they can certainly find me on there.
Brilliant. And I'll put both of those links in the show notes as well. So thank you very much for joining me today. And thank you to all of the listeners. If you have enjoyed this episode, please send us a DM or look on the Instagram page. There will be a clip if you want to comment and let us know what you thought. We would be very excited to hear everything that you have to say. So we will be back next week with another episode.